Hello and welcome to another video aiming to get you to improve your grade. We are looking at the character of Edward Hyde and we're looking at the top 5 quotations about him. This is number 2 in the series, and keeping with the theme of 5, I'm going to teach you the 5 themes that the quotation will link to. If you can confidently write about at least 2 of those in your essay, you will very likely get the top grades. Okay, let's jump into the quotation. This is from Enfield's Story of the Door, and it is the first description of Hyde. He is not easy to describe. There is something wrong with his appearance, something displeasing, something downright detestable. I never saw a man I so disliked, and yet I scarce know why. He must be deformed somewhere. He gives a strong feeling of deformity, although I couldn't specify the point. He's an extraordinary looking man, and yet I really can name nothing out of the way. No, sir, I can make no hand of it. I can't describe him, and it's not want of memory, for I declare I can see him this moment. Okay, you probably know by now that Stevenson is writing this as a bit of a Christian morality tale because most of his readers are Christian, and he's written this novella in a real rush over 3 days, desperate for money, even more so than a normal author, and he has to give the audience what they want. So the indescribable and invisible deformity represents Hyde's lack of a soul. Enfield senses this is missing, and that's why he can't describe it just from looking at the man's appearance. There's something almost supernatural going on within. It's that spark of divinity that's wrong. His soul is wrong. And number 2, if you're a Christian, the soul is what makes the body real. The body itself is just a shell, if you like. And this is why Enfield can see the body, but is somehow... it looks unreal to him, so he cannot really describe it. The repetition of the word deformity shows how damaging it is to give up one's soul, to willingly turn towards evil. So this is a dramatization, if you like, of Christian morality. If you turn to evil, you won't just become disgusting to people through your personality. It will even affect how they perceive your appearance. Enfield's dislike symbolises how we should all react to people who turn against God. But as always with Stevenson, he's also playing a subtle game. So in these first 4 points, he's giving the readers exactly what they want. However, the subtlety is this. The problem of wanting to kill Hyde on first meeting him, that's what Enfield wants to do, implies that Stevenson himself rejects this view. Enfield is behaving in a much more evil way than Hyde is at this stage, and therefore Stevenson is suggesting that most people are much more capable of evil than they would like to admit. And this suggests that he's simply giving his readership this Christian perspective, even though he doesn't really believe in it. And he's hoping that an astute reader will look at the character of Enfield and see how Stevenson uses Enfield to undermine the idea of a Christian morality tale. Next, he uses the fear that many of his readers will have about scientific progress. Therefore, Hyde, as a creation of science, is created with a deformity, because he is created by man, an evil act that goes against God. It's seen as sacrilegious. There's the correct spelling. I hope you spotted that. Because Stevenson could have created this monster Hyde to appear absolutely beautiful, and still have him commit evil acts. But he doesn't do that because he has to tap into his readers' fear of what science is doing and how it's upsetting their faith in Christianity. What's the link with Christianity? Well, Stevenson himself's probably an atheist, And we can see that Darwin's theory of natural selection, which comes from his book, The Descent of Man, shows that we are not evolving to any greater or moral civilized being. And so in Christianity, we become better human beings because we follow Christian teaching. But in The Descent of Man, only the fittest will survive. And Hyde is fitter for survival than Jekyll. He survives longer than Jekyll does, both symbolically when he can turn from Jekyll into Hyde at will, but Jekyll can never reclaim and change back into himself. He can never change back into Jekyll without the potion. Hyde is able to change Jekyll without the potion, and ultimately Hyde briefly outlives Jekyll. Jekyll dies before Hyde commits suicide. And through this, Stevenson is tapping into this fear that evolution is actually potentially making us worse. So science is showing us that man is degenerating, regressing to a more primitive state, and Christians would have seen the lack of Christian belief or the threat to Christian belief offered by science, such as Darwin with The Descent of Man. They would have seen that as making mankind worse. So suddenly discovering that we're all evolved from primitive creatures all the way back to our ancestors coming from the sea is not something that would have delighted most of the readership, who were used to seeing the Bible as a literal story. The story of Adam and Eve they believed was true. And now suddenly it's turned out to be a story. But as usual, Stevenson is playing a bit of a game here. So his more astute readers will see that when he creates Hyde, he's trying to show the science of how we are actually evolving. And therefore he's on the side of Darwin, and he's on the side of science, saying the Bible is simply a story. It's just something we tell ourselves in order to force people to follow a particular moral set of rules about behaviour. And Stevenson himself may have rejected many of those. Which leads us to the theme of repressed homosexuality. So Stevenson himself had homosexual friends. He wasn't prejudiced about homosexuality in the way that the rest of society was. So just a few years after the publication of this book, in the 1890s, there's a famous homosexuality case in the courts where the most famous writer and playwright of the time, Oscar Wilde, is accused of being homosexual by the father of Lord Alfred Douglas. And Lord Alfred Douglas has written this poem, and in the poem he's described homosexuality as the love that dare not speak its name. And so he's tapping into the way Victorians viewed homosexuality. There's many people who saw it as love, something to be celebrated, but they knew they were by far in the minority, and most of Stevenson's readers would not wish to speak about homosexuality. They would find it something that they dare not speak about. The emphasis on Hyde's appearance, giving Enfield signals his conscious mind won't read, but his unconscious mind does. This is how the repression of homosexuality would work. So the thing that is downright detestable and displeasing isn't visible. He can't actually see it. And the reason for that could be that Stevenson is alluding to Hyde presenting himself as a homosexual. This is the invisible deformity that he can't see. And he hammers this message home by saying, look, I declare I can see him at this moment. I can actually picture the man. I just don't have the language to describe what I can physically see. And then finally, we've got this contextual information that Stevenson deliberately chose to live abroad, away from these social norms that were repressive. And he chose to reject Western civilization, first going to America and then settling in Samoa, somewhere that people of his day, his contemporary readers, would have seen as primitive but also exotic. Okay, well, the next theme is looking at the Victorian reader's love of the Gothic genre and the detective genre. And in this novella, Stevenson combines the two, Gothic elements with detective elements. And he does that because he is desperate to give his readership what they want. So contemporary readers are attracted to the horror elements of true crime and fiction. And so he presents this horrific character of Hyde. And similarly, they're desperate to solve mysteries with the birth of the detective novel and short stories about detectives. And this is why we are presented with Hyde as a mystery, something that has to be solved. Enfield's exposition, the explanation at the start, the exposition, sets up the mystery of Hyde, not just who is he or who does his wealth come from. Remember, the cheque is paid over by somebody famous. But also, what is he? Is he a new kind of being? What is this strange person who can't be described? And also, this is an experiment in fiction. Fiction's changing all the time in the Victorian period. Science fiction is just about to be written with H.G. Wells, for example. Or there's a good deal of it already with Jules Verne. We've got new types of fiction being written for the very first time. And Stevenson has come up with this idea of, can I write about a character who no one can see? None of my readers can visualise him. It's quite a dangerous thing to do in a book that you really want to sell. Describe a character when no one can actually see what they're like. So logically that was be impossible, but he set himself this challenge, and I think you'll agree he succeeds. And then finally, perhaps his main purpose in writing this novella is to attack the hypocrisy of middle-class men, those men that he's leaving behind when he leaves England. So Enfield and the Doctor have both just met Hyde and instantly have the same desire to kill him. He's done no damage to this little girl. She's just bumped into him. She was running, he wasn't. And he's just carried on walking, so he must have just stepped on her with one foot. He's not stamped on her or anything like that, but they extort £100 from him, huge amount of money in those days. And Enfield actually boasts about this to Utterson, and it's that boasting that Stevenson uses to show that these middle-class men have no shame about their hypocrisy. They pretend to be moral men, but actually they're completely immoral. Further immoral act here is Enfield protects Jekyll's name. He's seen the name on the cheque that Hyde brings out of Jekyll's house, but he doesn't reveal that even to his friend Utterson. In other words, the impulse to protect another gentleman, another middle-class man, is so great they won't even talk about it amongst friends. This allows them to act hypocritically and to keep any wrongdoing that they do secret, because they know that all their acquaintances will keep it secret as well. And beyond that, Enfield doesn't even know Jekyll, and yet is still loyal to him as a member of the same class and the same sex. So they would rather cover up wrongdoing of men like themselves. And the deal, of course, is that if they do anything wrong, they expect that to be covered up by other middle-class men. And then finally, Enfield dislikes Hyde and assumes a deformity simply by looking at him. The emphasis on must implies this might be a prejudice. Yet so when he says he must be deformed somewhere, this is Stevenson's subtle way of saying no. There was actually no deformity, and you're just looking for a reason to justify your dislike, but actually there might not be a reason that justifies your dislike. It's simply that you're a hypocrite and willing to murder somebody or give in to that desire as much as you can in civilized society. And so you pretend to be moral by not killing him but taking £100 off him, but actually that is still a vile and evil act. Enfield is trying to justify it here with the word must, but actually Stevenson is saying you can't justify it. So there you have it, one quotation linked to all 5 of the themes, and yes, you really can get the top grades if you just write about a couple of these during the course of your essay. If you are new to my channel, I hope you found that really useful, and do consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon on my channel.